welcome to the Tech Leaders Podcast. Gareth here. Everyone seems to be talking about challenger banks at the moment. There's clearly a lot of disruption going on in the retail banking sector, and these guys, these challenger banks, really seem to be spearheading that. So I was really excited about this one. We met with the Chief Technology Advocate of Starling Bank, Jason Maude, really knowledgeable. We covered everything from his journey through to his thoughts on Agile versus Waterfall, on Anne Boden's vision, the original founder of Starling Bank, through to sort of the social impact of a cashless society and all the other bits and bobs around the periphery of that. It was a really fascinating conversation, thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy. Jason Maude. Thank you very much for doing this, Jason. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for inviting me on.
It is a privilege to come in and to meet yourself. And we just wanted to go through a few things about your background and the journey you've been on and where we are now and all the exciting stuff that's coming up ahead.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
So maybe let's start at the beginning then. So tell us a little bit about Jason and your sort of journey from when you left education up until the point of joining Starling Bank.
Sure. So my journey has been in some ways fairly linear. I started straight out of university working in the city in financial software and have essentially continued doing that throughout my career. However, there have been a number of different aspects to that along the way. So I've engaged in training and teaching of people to be software engineers. Teaching graduates how software works in commercial terms and so on, and bringing them from the sort of university environment of software into the commercial world of software. I've also started more and more now, and this is now more my job, speaking about technology and talking about technology and presenting the technology behind the organisation to a wider audience. And so when I joined Starling, I first joined as a senior engineer and was writing code and leading teams writing code. And then I moved into this space of more talking about the technology. And that is from both a technical perspective, so the point of view of talking about it to a software engineer about our architecture and the code we use and that sort of thing, but also talking about it to people in the industry, to regulators, to the general public who are, who do not have that technical background, but trying to explain to them what the technical background of the bank is, how it works and how it affects the running of the bank. Because Starling Bank is such a digital organisation and such a technology-focused organisation that you really can't understand the bank without understanding the technology behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just rewinding back then to the kind of organisation you were in prior to Starling Bank, you come from the consultancy world, don't you?
Yes, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that experience.
So that was a very different experience. So prior to this, I worked at a consultancy firm who wrote software for banks and financial services companies and equipment financiers. So the finance arm of a car firm, for example, car manufacturing firms, and that was very much a case of what you would describe as a traditional method of software engineering. So you would sit down, you would agree with the client a specification of how the software was to work, and then that would be given to a group of engineers who would then write out design something to fulfill those requirements, and then write out the code, and then deliver the code, and then the code would sit there for 3 months or so, and then it would be taken and tested by a few people at the firm and so on, who would come back with questions, and then it would be another 3 to 6 months of testing and that sort of thing, and then it might sit there for another 3 to 6 months and so on, and eventually it might make it into production. And there was this sort of very the sense of urgency almost became artificial in some ways, because you had this sense of urgency to meet this deadline, and you were sitting there going, well, I don't understand why this urgency's here. The code isn't going to go out for another year or so. I don't see why we're rushing for this particular date. So it was a very different atmosphere. It was a very much a very much an atmosphere of being disconnected from what you were doing as an engineer. You were disconnected from the actual running code, the customers who were actually...
So are you saying the tech was a periphery thing? It wasn't the main thing?
I think it was... I wouldn't call it a periphery thing. I would say it was definitely one of, two main strands to the consultancy. One was consultancy and advising people how to solve their technology problems. This was specifically around asset finance. But that was one arm, and then there was the technology itself, which was the solution being provided. That was the other arm, as it were, of the company. But technology was definitely the subservient portion.
Right. Okay.
As I will describe it, it was the consultancy bit was definitely the let's solve this problem and we will use technology to do that. And then technology had to come up with the way of solving the problem, basically.
Yeah, so tell us about the moment that Starling Bank came calling and your why for joining the organisation.
Sure. So I was looking around for something new, and the person who was the CTO at the time, Greg Hawkins, we'd worked together before, and he emailed me and said, do you want to come over and work for this new bank? I simultaneously messaged him on a different platform saying, I'm interested in this new bank you're creating. Do you have any positions open? And so we messaged each other, missed each other for a few weeks, and then got in contact and so on. And
so where did you work together previously?
We worked together at this
at the other firm.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
the other.
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
So we sat down and talked about it. And what intrigued me was not only the possibility of working with people like Greg, who I knew were good technologists and understood technology, but also the prospect of creating a bank from scratch, which was a very unusual proposition. Prior to this, it's often easy to forget what life was like back, only a few years ago. But prior to this, there hadn't been a new bank, with the exception of Metro Bank, for 100 or 150 years, some huge amount of time. So the creating a new bank from scratch was a rather unusual prospect, and it was an intriguing one as well. Curious to create something that sounds like it's incredibly complicated and incredibly difficult to do from scratch. And it was also the prospect of working in this in a very a way that respected modern technology and where it was and how it was working. And the environment when I got here was much more akin to what I imagine a big tech firm would be like, albeit at the startup stage of that.
Right. Okay. So, what lessons did you take from the sort of corporate asset management culture? Did you, or what did you learn from that experience that sort of enabled you to become a valued part of this new exciting adventure?
Sure. So there were a lot of things that I learnt in the sort of corporate world, working for a consultancy and working with big incumbent financial institutions. The main thing, I think, was that software design does not work in a project style fashion.
Do you mean like in a waterfall project style
fashion?
Yes,
a waterfall project style fashion. That is not how software is best created, shall we say. The reason for that is that when you're designing things in a waterfall fashion, what that's designed to do, where that waterfall pattern originally came from, was engineering for projects such as building large buildings or building chemical plants or cars or something big and mechanical.
Yeah.
Something where you have a reasonably good idea about how the thing is going to work once you've designed it. You're reasonably confident about your the expectations you have on this thing, but once you start, you're committed, and you cannot change things, halfway through.
Is there a culture in Waterfall of not being able to make any mistakes? Whereas with an agile approach, you kind of embrace the mistakes a bit more, and it's more trial and error. Is that what you're saying?
It's not that you can't make mistakes. It's that the whole process is designed to try and prevent you from making any mistakes once you've started.
Certainly, yeah.
Because it was designed to do, to help you build buildings where if you make a mistake once you've started, it costs a huge amount of money for you to correct.
Absolutely.
Whereas Agile goes, well, actually, it doesn't matter if we make a mistake. If you've got a mistake in your software, you can just, sit down at a terminal, type something new, deploy it, and then you've corrected the problem. It's no more expensive correcting something in situ in a running environment than it is in a design phase. It doesn't have to be. If you're running things in a waterfall way, it can be more expensive, but it doesn't have to be more expensive.
No, of course.
So that is why. So Agile is better. An Agile methodology, Sorry, I shouldn't say agile methodology because it's
an agile way of working.
An agile way of working, yes. An agile philosophy of working is a much better philosophy for trying to design and develop software.
Certainly.
It allows you to learn from what you're doing as you're going. It allows you to learn from mistakes you've made and learn from feedback that you get from the actual use of the software.
Yeah, so it's very progressive inherently, really, isn't it? So in terms of so you came into this. There was clearly it was a very agile-driven business when you joined as a senior engineer. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
And then you obviously embraced that. And then a couple of years later, you're CTO. Talk us through that.
Or CTA.
CTA, excuse me. Yeah. Chief Technology Advocate.
Advocate, yes.
So talk us through that sort of that journey.
That transition, yes, absolutely. So where this came from was a quite funny incident in retrospect, which was that so QCon, the big technology conference, we were having a couple of our engineers speak there about our mobile APIs. And the day before the conference, another speaker on a different track in the conference pulled out at the last minute. They, the organisers were desperately emailing around all of the organisations who were at QCon saying, "Can you provide another speaker?" And our CEO, Anne, really likes accepting challenges and trying to get solutions to them very quickly. So, of course, she said, yes, absolutely, we will find someone.
Threw you under the bus.
Well, actually, I threw myself under the bus. I said, oh, well, I'll volunteer to do this. This was put out on Slack, and I said, yeah, sure, I will volunteer to do this. So this was less than 24 hours to go. We had to, come up with a presentation, create one, and go on stage and present.
And how long was the presentation sort of for?
It's 45 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's quite a reasonably long presentation.
You've got to do a lot of prep for 45 minutes, though, haven't you?
Yeah, you do have to come up with a reasonable amount of content and so on.
Had you done anything similar before?
I had, but never in a sort of professional context. So I'd done things like debating, public speaking at university, speaking on radio and that sort of thing. But a lot of that was very improvised, as is the format. Whereas this was, a much more planned thing, usually is a much more planned thing.
Yeah.
So I went along and presented it, and it was incredibly well received, so much so that they invited me back to give the same presentation in the QCon in San Francisco.
Right.
So they invited me out there because it was,
which I think is on YouTube, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can go and find a recording of that on YouTube and so
Yeah.
on. So they invited me along there. So it was very well received, and I really enjoyed doing it. And then the suggestion was, well, we really need someone to get out there and talk about the technology behind the bank. Anne did an incredible amount of talking about the bank itself and the vision behind the bank and why it was there and what it was aiming to do. But we really needed someone to talk about the actual, technical aspects of the bank.
Yeah. Because Anne's background is banking. She was an executive in sort of traditional banks.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, her background way back is in engineering. So she started out her career in engineering and banking.
Yeah.
But that was back in the 80s. So her banking for much of her banking career is in the sort of the executive, the board level, and,
right.
And running the banks from that perspective.
So before we dive into the tech piece in anger, okay, I just wanted to talk about a little bit about Anne, because obviously that's the founder of the business and the values she sort of wanted to set up the business and sort of abide by, if you like. So there was obviously a financial crisis, 2008, 2009. I think I read that she quoted that the banking system in the UK or worldwide was fundamentally broken, and that was a driver to set up a business like Starling.
Yep.
Can you talk us through what your take is on that, and what the endeavour is of the business, and what your values are, and what you want to achieve?
Sure, absolutely. So I think that the banking was traditionally a fairly respected profession. But then it was a profession in which you were, all of the actors were fairly conservative. They held the trust of their customers in very high regard. They needed the trust of their customers in order to be able to run a bank and so on. And then what happened in the sort of 80s and 90s and so on is that banking became much more focused on making profits and expanding and much more corporate in that sense. And then in the financial crisis, what happened is that got lost. The corporate nature of things meant that the trust of the customers as the highest thing to which the bank could aspire got lost. It disappeared. This was, I suppose, most represented by the fact that we had, for the first time in many years, a run on the bank with Northern Rock, where everyone tried to withdraw their money simultaneously. And a run on the bank was something that previously people had only really known because it was in the film Mary Poppins, and they only really knew about it from there.
Yeah.
It wasn't a real thing. It was a
Well, I don't think it really happened since probably the crisis in 1929 around then. I don't think it really happened since then.
No. So it was this sort of fictional thing in people's heads that had happened many, many years ago, but it actually started happening.
Yeah.
And so the customers' trust in banks just disappeared. And banking became very, viewed as just a profession in which people were in it for themselves, and banks were just out to make a quick buck off the customers and so on. So Anne's vision, and I guess the vision of the bank as a whole, is to make banking better, is to bring banking back to the customer and say, no, you can trust us with your money. And increasingly, not only with your money, but with your data. You can trust us. We will hold this in trust for you. We will provide you with a great service. And it's that sort of, how can we help the customer? How can we make the customer have a better financial life? Provide them with the tools to, allow themselves to provide themselves with a better financial life. How can we do that? That's what we are aiming to do.
Yeah. So you're constantly looking for ways to better engage with your customers. Talk us through what you've learned on this journey in terms of providing a better service, because I'm assuming you're incrementally improving your service or looking to improve your service all the time.
Absolutely.
What have you done in the last, let's say 2 years, which has got you closer to your customers?
It's a difficult question because I'm now having to project my mind back 2 years ago because everything moves so fast here that it's
just things that spring to mind in terms of improvements.
Absolutely. So one big thing that we have done is the big thing in the past, I guess, year or so is moving into the business banking world. So we went into the consumer banking world and we asked ourselves, what are the problems here that people are experiencing? What are the things that are going wrong? And we started offering people a lot of features and ways of interacting with their money and with their bank account that they hadn't had before. And we set out with the idea of making the best consumer bank account that we could. But then we noticed that actually the problems in business banking, SME banking, are even worse than they are or were in consumer banking before we came along. Because SME banking has many more requirements and so on. You get this situation where people start up their own business. They want to form their own business. They want to follow their passion and share their passion with the world, and they end up being turned into glorified administrators because they have to fill in all these forms, process all these invoices.
It's not very seamless, is it?
No, it's not, and they have to transfer their whatever they've spent, their expenses, from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet to another spreadsheet, and then submit it to the accountant, and it all becomes very boring and tedious.
Yeah.
And we essentially wanted to come in and say, right, let's remove all that tedium. Let's provide you with automated tools that you can use that will remove that, necessity for doing all of that paperwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I suppose the big thing that we've done in the past, year or two is provide that same disruption to the business banking world that we did to the consumer banking world by asking ourselves, what are the problems that business customers are facing and how can we remove those?
Which is always admin. But
yeah, absolutely. And it's how can we automate that admin?
One thing that I think was probably, correct me if I'm wrong, was this, because you guys have got your own marketplace for your customers whereby they can engage with other financial products.
Yeah.
And that it takes away a lot of the kind of admin and all the parts that you talked about, the paperwork that you talked about. For example, you can go onto Starling and buy home insurance and things, can't you, through partner companies?
Yes.
Was this an inspiration to get into the business banking world because of the successes you had with that, or was that just a periphery? Was that sort of a separate thing altogether?
I think it was. I don't think it was the cause of us going into business banking. I think the cause there was us seeing seeing opportunity to solve a load of problems.
Right.
I think that the marketplace has helped a lot with moving into the business banking space because we can now partner up with providers of accountancy software, for example, who will allow easy processing of accounts, and we can then transfer automatically all of your spending from your business account into Xero or Free Agent or any other accounting software provider we connect with. So that you don't have to, manually enter everything yourself.
Yeah.
So we've removed all of that data transference and entry piece and done it automatically. So I think that the presence of the marketplace has been a massive help for us in, creating our business banking proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds really exciting. So what technology innovations do you have in store for this year then?
So one big one is that we are trying to further split up our back-end services. This one is a technology innovation which the customers might not see any direct benefit from. In fact, if we do it correctly, the customers won't see anything. But this sort of further splitting up, further fractaling of our services is very significant because it avoids us falling into the legacy code trap. And this is where many incumbent organizations go wrong, is they start off with a greenfield site and they create some software and it's all great and so on, and then they just let it lie and they don't maintain it, and eventually it just falls into this trap where they don't know how to maintain it anymore, and it gets stuck, and they can no longer provide innovations for their customers. They can no longer provide updates to the software or fix bugs because they're stuck with this code that they don't know how to maintain.
I heard you talk about this before. I think you referred to it as a zombie box or something.
Yes.
But it's basically, I think we talked about you talked about the example of COBOL being, because it's pretty much a defunct programming language now, isn't it? And there's not many people around who can maintain and change this stuff.
Indeed. And the zombie box problem is where you create, a long time ago, someone created some code and wrote it in a language that is now defunct, such as COBOL.
Which is worth mentioning is still the case in banking institutions in the public sector. This is very much still going on.
This is very much increasingly becoming a problem, especially for institutions like banks and the government, which have been around for a long time, anticipate being around for a long time, and who don't regularly replace their software or update their software or keep it updated and maintained. So you've got this box that's sitting there with some performing a very important function. It's either making a lot of money or doing something that is vital to the business or the government organisation. But no one knows how to maintain it anymore. No one knows precisely what it does. No one knows precisely how it works. So everyone is terrified of changing it, because if they change it, something will go wrong. It almost inevitably something will go wrong. So they get into this situation where they don't replace the software. They can't replace the software, and this box just sits there as a zombie. They can't turn it off, but it isn't really alive. It's not it's not a living thing. It's not a living piece of code. And this gets increasingly more and more expensive to maintain. Now, what often happens in that situation is that eventually someone will bite the bullet and just say, right, we have to sort this. Let's just replace it wholesale, rewrite it from scratch. So they do a massive IT project, massive software replacement at fantastically huge costs, replace it, and then it doesn't quite work and things go wrong and there's a big hoo-ha, and then it just gets left, and then in 10 years' time they're in exactly the same place again. They don't know where everything is.
One example that I heard about was a very well-known airline, and apparently most of their technical operations are underpinned by a system which I think it's an acronym, and then the year it was actually implemented is something like XLR 72 or something, and it was actually implemented in 1972, and it's still performing all the critical things for this airline, which is scary, isn't it? Well, but nobody will touch it because they don't want anything to go wrong. But
it's not a problem if it was created in 1972, so long as it was constantly maintained after that. So long as the knowledge about how to maintain it is living within the organisation.
And that's the thing, that's the problem, is the knowledge. And that's what, that's what gets lost. People age, things move on, people retire, etc., etc., etc. So from a technology perspective then, you're obviously on Java 11 now?
Yes, absolutely. That's what our...
And you plan to evolve that,
Absolutely,
what other technology, or what other technologies, tools, what other things have you got in store for 2020?
So our Android code base, this is another example of something we've done to migrate. Our Android code base was originally written in Java because Java was the native language for Android, and then Android changed their native language to Kotlin, which is a language based on the JVM. So has similar roots to Java, but is a different language. We are gradually migrating our code base for our Android code base onto Kotlin, so that we're moving it across so that it remains in the native language, which makes things easier to create, write, and maintain. Similarly, our iOS is written in Swift. Yes. Yeah. Which is the native language for the iPhone.
It's Objective-C, isn't it? I think. Or
is it yes. Yeah. If you go down under the covers, yes, right. Absolutely.
I'm sounding like I'm an engineer now. I'm talking from sort of recruitment level knowledge of these things.
That's
but
fine. The main new innovation that we are rapidly developing at the moment is the Internet Bank. So that is the browser-based offering. Confusingly, we have only just become an internet bank because
I was going to say, because you made a conscious decision a long time ago to just be a mobile platform, didn't you? So
yes.
how has that happened then?
So one thing we realised, especially when we moved into the world of business banking, is that business banking requires a lot of features, and our apps are already incredibly feature rich, and we don't want to sort of overload them, as it were, with features. We don't want to stuff more and more and more features into the app, because then it gets too big, too complex to navigate for the user, and too complex to maintain for the engineers.
It compromises the usability a little bit, then, doesn't it? And that's got to be one of the main considerations.
Definitely, yes. It's a balance. So where we're going with the Internet Bank then is we want to provide more features, features around VAT, around self-assessment tax, around invoicing, and so on and so on. So we need to find a way of delivering these, and we will deliver those via a browser, a browser system. Confusingly, in the regulatory nomenclature, you only become an Internet Bank after you have a browser-based offering. So even though Starling was entirely delivered over the internet, because it was only delivered by the mobile phone, we weren't actually an internet bank until we launched the browser-based offering.
Well, that's a classic case of dated classification, I suppose, isn't it?
Absolutely. It was quite hilarious. So, on regulatory forms, when the question came up, like with how do you provide internet banking, we had to say we don't. For quite some time, rather amusingly, so we're developing out those features, and that's a big innovation that we're putting a lot of work into, developing, putting more features on, increasing the range of, and that sort of thing. We're also planning to try to launch in Ireland at some point. We're hoping to. So, obviously that requires moving across to a different country, requires some degree of technological innovation and so on, to make sure that you can distinguish between your Irish customers and your British customers to some extent, but then also provide them wherever possible with the same set of functionality and the same set of features. And that
do you have further international plans then? I know we're talking beyond that, but I mean, is that on the business plan?
Yes, absolutely. We're hoping to move into Europe as well.
What about the US? Because that's the big one, isn't it?
So moving into the US is tricky. And the reason it's tricky is because their financial infrastructure isn't as well developed.
Really? That's interesting.
Indeed. The reason being that the United States has always taken a dim view of the government, or a dimmer view of the government developing infrastructure. So the level of government-developed infrastructure for payments in the United States is much lower than it is here. So a lot of the pipe work which you would connect up to make payments and that sort of thing in the US, and a lot of which their tech firms are connecting up to, is developed by companies, not by the government. And obviously that provides a bit of a barrier to coming in, because you're sitting there going, well, do we want to hook ourselves up to this company's network? And that exposes you to the risk that the company could disappear, or could raise their prices up significantly, and that sort of thing. So it's more difficult. So I think the US will come eventually, but we might go to other places elsewhere first.
When you mentioned Europe, then, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our first target. So Western Europe in general.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay then, so moving on from that, I just wanted to talk about something else, which is something that I'm interested in. I think, and just to give you a quick anecdote on that, not an anecdote really, just something I generally complain about to myself often is when I walk into a shop and they say they don't take card, and I got to somehow get cash from somewhere.
Sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Paying cash, all right, that type of thing. So, now, this was the case a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Cash was the norm. Now, cash isn't the norm anymore.
Yes.
And I can't help thinking that you guys have had a big hand in that, along with the other challenger banks. I think you've definitely educated the public towards this notion of a cashless society. You're not responsible for it. But you've definitely contributed to it, I think. So my question is, what do you think... Well, first of all, do you think that's an accurate statement to say that you contributed to that? And if so... what do you think the social impact will be of a pure cashless society, which is inevitably where we're going to end up, isn't it?
So I would say that, yes, we have contributed to some extent to the move away from cash by making it much easier to spend and see your spending represented on your mobile phone. I mean, I think that the mobile phone also has the smartphone specifically has a lot to answer for, given that things like Apple Pay and Google Pay now exist and so on, and you can use your phone as a payment device as well. That's another innovation in the milieu of innovations that have contributed towards us going, cash becoming less and less of a thing. The problem with going completely cashless as a society is that cash is very good at one thing, which is providing interactions between two people without needing anything else to be in place. So you can perform a financial interaction with cash without you needing to have, say, a registered address or a bank account or anything else. You have these tokens which can just be freely exchanged without you needing that. And I think that there are a number of problems which, as yet, technology has not come up with a solution for, that cash is a solution for. So things like...
Has cryptocurrency potentially solved that?
No. Cryptocurrency introduces other problems, which I'll come on to in a minute. But I think that these are problems such as, what if you're in a domestic abuse situation, for example, and your partner is controlling access to your bank account. So there, getting out of that by using a bank account is not possible. So how do you do that? If you're homeless and you can't get a bank account because you don't have a registered address, but you still need some form of, ability to purchase goods and that sort of thing. How do you do that without cash? So there are a number of problems such as those and a few more, which at the moment cash provides a very good solution to that other things don't.
Yeah, okay. So how do you see financial services evolving over the next 5 years?
So I see them basically moving more and more towards having a customer focus. So I see it basically moving away from this corporate mindset of, how do we make the most profit? How do we make this bank profitable? And moving towards how do we serve the customer? And how do we serve the customer whilst making a profit at the same time? Because, you have to be sustainable as a financial service. You can't just, grow and grow and serve more and more customers without being able to make money. But serving the customer should be the sort of primary goal rather than making money as the primary goal. And that's going to involve, I think, a lot of disaggregation of service, a lot of services becoming independent from large banks. The idea of a bank as a one-stop shop for all your financial needs is going to become less and less of a thing, especially as banks close more and more branches. So you're going to get into a situation where rather than going to a bank for a mortgage, for example, you go to a specialised mortgage broker whose focus is not just on providing you with a mortgage, but whose focus is how can we help you buy a house? That's what you want to do, and we are here to help you buy a house throughout all of the stages that entails.
Yeah, I think I'm already seeing that happening. Halifax are doing that, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're trying to create this like really nice environment for people to go in and kind of like socialize in, and just sit. It'll be like a coffee shop type environment.
Absolutely,
and so they can just talk and get advice on getting onto the property ladder in London, which is notoriously difficult.
Yeah,
obviously.
absolutely.
So,
yeah, and it's also that thing of, at the moment when you're buying a house, to run with this example. You have to, firstly you go to the estate agent and, they help you find you the property and so on. But then you have to go to the bank to get the mortgage to actually buy the property. And then you have to go to, conveyancers and all sorts of other legal solicitor style paperwork. You have to get someone to do that to actually, sign off the sale and that sort of thing. And you, the buyer, or you, the seller, is having to go round and negotiate between all of these different groups. And the question is why? Why do you have to do what is, can amount to a part-time job of running around different groups of people and getting them to talk to each other?
Yeah.
Why can't there just be a group of people you are talking to who are doing all of these jobs for you? And that's the sort of thing to think about, the problem to solve, which could cause the same disruption in the mortgage and the home buying and selling market as was caused in consumer banking by Starling.
Yeah.
It's looking at these problems and finding technological solutions for them.
Definitely. Okay. So I kind of sensed you got an opinion on decentralized cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
What's your thoughts?
So, my thoughts about cryptocurrencies is that I think that blockchain technology in general is very useful for a number of specific applications. But I think that cryptocurrencies as a whole won't really go anywhere. They won't really take off any more than they have. They'll be used by enthusiasts, but I think that the general public will not get in on the act. The reason being that the entire purpose behind a cryptocurrency is to be decentralized. It is to be something where there is no one body sitting there with centralized control saying, we are the leaders, we are the deciders, and so on. But because of that, because there's no centralized control, when something goes wrong, and inevitably something will go wrong. If someone tells me that they've invented a technology where nothing can possibly go wrong, I will point at the Titanic and get off the ship. It's bound to go wrong, especially if someone says there's nothing that can possibly go wrong. When something goes wrong, there is no centralized body to turn to for correction. There is no one that can help you. If a cryptocurrency encoded contract goes sour, or someone loses a load of money because of a technology fault or something like that, that's it. You're screwed. You've lost your money. There's no recovery. And I don't think that the general public will accept that. They won't accept something without a centralized solution to solve problems that come along.
I think maybe a crypto evangelist may come back there and say that there is a centralized body and that is the collective, that is the crowd. You know what I mean? So it's and that's the whole thing. But I do appreciate that's not really going to solve all the problems.
Sure. Then the problem is that in order to get your money back after a technology fault, you have to convince the crowd to give you the money back. But then that means you're having to go You don't have to just make a petition to one single body. You then have to go around and convince 51% of the people to reverse the decision and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And give you your money back. So that is I don't think from the perspective of an average everyday consumer, it creates a huge number of problems, and it doesn't really solve any. I understand the sort of, this is the libertarian's dream of the trustless network. We don't need a centralized body to provide trust because the technology provides trust itself. It doesn't really. I think you can't. That's a human problem that you can't technology away. You can't, just create technology to get you out of interacting with people.
No, absolutely. No, I understand what you're saying. So I'm just mindful of time, so I wanted to jump towards the sort of final part of the interview, which is where I generally would like you to think sort of, or put you in the shoes of your 21-year-old self.
Yep.
The two parts of the question: what advice would you give a 21-year-old Jason,
Yep.
who is obviously a fledgling coder who wants to get into the jobs market and build a career for themselves within their sort of passion or within their vocational sort of direction that they want to go in this case coding. And what do you think, for a young person in general who's listening, who wants to get into coding, wants to build a career, wants to become a chief technology advocate within a growing business like Starling?
Sure.
What would you say to this person?
What I would say is, obviously, you have to learn how to code and learn good software engineering principles and that sort of thing and do all that. But you also need to learn human interaction skills. You also need to learn how to talk to people about the software. You also need to learn how to work in a team on a piece of software and learn how to create that. So you have to have that human interaction side, that empathy for what's going on. Because if you don't, then you won't be able to create software that actually does things that people want. And you won't be able to create it in a team. This idea of the rock star developer, the developer who's so much better than everyone else and, can create code 10 times faster and so on. I mean, I can create code 10 times faster than I am now just by, bashing the keyboard, but it's not necessarily going to be any good or serve any purpose.
Absolutely.
So I think this rock star development concept is luckily being put out to pasture, if not shot in the head, because it's a bad concept.
Yeah, so it's about understanding why you're doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
and working back from that premise, I suppose, isn't it?
And that requires you to work with the people that you are developing the software with, and the people you're developing the software for, and understand their needs and so on, and understand the strengths and the way your team interacts and so on. And that's true even if you don't want to go out and talk about the software like I do. Even if you're just going to, spend your career creating software, inside the office, you need to be able to interact with your team because, any application worth its salt, you're not going to be able to write entirely by yourself.
No, absolutely. So let me just chuck the same question at you, but from a different angle, with a different element to it. If you were to give advice to an entrepreneur of a startup, a technology-driven startup, whether it be in fintech or software, just other types of software, what advice would you give to sort of new startup founders who are trying to scale tech and trying to scale their business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say be very clear and very definite about the problem you are trying to solve, at least initially. You can move on to other problems later, but be very clear that, here is the problem we are trying to solve. This is why it's a problem. This is what we are going to do this is what we are going to try to achieve. What our vision is for the solution of this problem. Be very committed to that and very flexible on solutions. So exactly how you achieve that vision, how you get from the problem situation to the vision situation. Be very flexible about that. Don't be afraid to try something, go, this isn't working, let's try something else. So be fixed on your problem, but flexible about your solution. I would also say, develop software in the way it was meant to be developed, in this sort of agile manner. Don't try and develop software in this, very waterfall methodology, because that doesn't work for developing software. And if you try and do it in a small startup organization, you will drown yourself in process and you will never get anywhere.
What about in terms of building the right culture and attracting the talent that you want to attract?
Sure. So be very clear. So one thing is that you need to align your culture with your vision. So, culture isn't just things like we play table tennis or we have Mario Kart or whatever. That's a nice aside, but it's not really culture. The culture has to align with the vision you're trying to achieve, and the two things have to be in lockstep with each other to a certain extent. I would also say that in terms of attracting talent, be very clear and open and honest about what your vision is, what your culture is, how you work, and describe everything from the great big grand visions down to the little things such as we play table tennis, and be able to explain and describe all of that, because as soon as you become hidden, as soon as you start hiding things or not talking about things, that's what starts to kill culture and starts to put people off, because they want to know why you're hiding a particular thing. Why is it not being talked about or shown, and that sort of thing.
Right.
You can read about Theranos, for example, as a fascinating tale of a...
We were talking about that. I was talking to somebody about that yesterday.
Yeah.
It's the company in America who invented the box that didn't do anything.
Yes.
Around blood analysis.
Yes, absolutely. The box that supposedly ran blood analyses but didn't actually do that, and they were doing all of the analysis on standard commercial equipment. And what really stands out about that company is the level of secrecy that was involved in this company, the level of segregation of people, and dividing up people up into little boxes so that no one knew about the whole of what was going on. That's a fascinating tale. So try and avoid that at all costs. Be open and transparent about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're paying people, how you're developing your software, what everyone's doing, and that sort of thing. That is what is attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to finish then, I just wanted to ask you, as we went off on a little anecdote there about Theranos, I just wanted to ask you, what book or TED Talk or person have you been inspired by, as a story which you always think of?
Sure. So there are a good deal of them. So the I mentioned Bad Blood, which is the book written about Theranos. That's inspiring in the sort of don't do this kind of way, but it's also inspiring in terms of the level of investigative detail that people had to go in to analyse the problem. There's the TED Talks by Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson, who talks about education. I'm sure many people have seen those. Those are always inspiring to me because he asks questions about how the system of education is constructed and run. And he asks questions that I didn't think to ask previously. And that is inspiring in the sense of the way to change the world is to look at it and ask questions about things that are taken for granted. It's taken as read as this is how we do things. And the vast majority of changes in the world, in fact I would say all changes in the world, have come from people who have stood up and go, well, why do we do things like that? I think there's a better way we can do things. And looking at the problems that doing things in that way causes, and then coming up with another way of doing those things.
I absolutely agree. I think questioning conventional wisdom is something we need to do more of. And Ken Robinson, I've seen that TED Talk. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I just wish somebody would follow through and question the education system so we could get it a little bit more modernised, because it is set up on very old sort of premises really about people working in factories and things. So
absolutely.
So no, that's a really great point. So, but look, I think we need to wrap up. So we really do appreciate you taking the time. It's been a fascinating conversation. We really do wish you all the best for 2020 and beyond. And I'm sure we'll cross paths again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Jason.